Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have a very special guest, and I'm delighted to have him on today. He is a two-time Grammy Award-winning bassist. He has been on the scene for over 60 years and has played with everyone under the sun. I'm talking about people like Wes Montgomery, Thelonious Monk, Sonny Rollins, Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock, McCoy Tyner, so many more, and yes, even A Tribe Called Quest. Please welcome to the show the legendary Mr. Ron Carter. How are you, sir?
As close as I can get for standing up for a bow.
Well, listen, Ron, thanks so much, as I said,
You're
for
welcome.
joining us. And as I said, you've been on the scene, man, for so long, for over 60 years. You played with everyone. Now, I understand that you are from Ferndale, Michigan.
Yes, about a block from Detroit.
Really? Oh, wow. Wow. Well, you know, it's interesting. Speaking of Detroit, I had Frida Payne on the show last week. And
Oh, yeah.
also two of your bass friends, Buster Williams and Reggie Workman, were on last week, too.
Oh, wow. Good
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
And good
Cecil
players,
McBee,
too, man.
Cecil McBee will be with us on Wednesday, too.
Just give them an air hug for me.
I definitely will. Well, listen, man, tell us a little bit about your background, Ron. Of course, most of us know you as the legendary bassist that you are, but tell us about your humble beginnings growing up and how you got involved in music, sir.
Well, I'm still humble, so I'm not sure I could kind of erase that off my resume.
Okay.
I started as a cellist at about 12 years old. And I played cello until I was a senior in high school, Cass Tech. 17 years old. And I thought I was not getting the number of calls I thought I should get because I played well, and I wasn't getting those kind of phone calls like the school got for putting together a string ensemble, and they'd hire kids from various schools around. I thought I should have gotten my share of calls. I didn't, but I looked around one day and the bass player was graduating.
Wow.
Well, you know, supply and demand has always been the name of that tune.
Yeah.
And since there was a supply, I was going to meet the demand if I was only a bass player.
You know, Ron, I read a story that you switched to the upright bass as a result of racism.
Well, that's the story I'm telling you because I felt that I wasn't getting my fair share. I thought that we played equally good, or I thought I played better than those guys did. Certainly, I was equal. Hello.
I think we got a problem here, technical difficulty. Your
Well, I
sound.
hear you now.
Oh, okay. There you go. There you go. You're back.
Okay.
Now. Okay.
I would not couch it in such these days cold terms, but it would be that equivalent to that in 1955. I guess you'd still call it that, maybe lowercase letters.
Yes, sir.
Anyway, my solution was to play an instrument that there was no one else playing. And since they were still getting calls for orchestral players from high school to fill these conventions and stuff like that, PTA meetings, they had to call me because I was the only one around. So I sold my cello and got a couple of teachers to show me how it began to work, and I was pretty bright, I guess. So
yeah,
I played for my 6 months for my senior semester to be the January of 1955 as a bassist. And I got an audition for the Eastern School of Music. They're having auditions that summer. And the person who was holding auditions came to my neighborhood, Cass Tech, and they set up audition times for players who auditioned for schools. And auditions for him, they got a 4-year scholarship to the Eastern School of Music as a bass player.
That's fantastic. Wow. Now, when your professional career started, I believe you started out with Chico Hamilton and Eric Dolphy and those guys?
That was my first big name gig, but I would go home to Detroit for the summers, and in order for me to stay in school for the coming year, I had the scholarship wasn't enough to cover the normal needs: strings, instrument repair, clothes, supplies, books, stuff. So I worked every summer in Detroit doing something. One summer I worked as a Parks and Recreation director. It means I would get up at 8 o'clock, go to the playgrounds, take out all the sports equipment until sundown at 6, collect it all up and put it all away until the next day. And I was playing basketball. I was younger then, so I played basketball and baseball with the kids all day, and horseshoes, of course, you know the game of horseshoes?
Sure.
Yeah, I was pretty good at those games. And then One summer I went down and I worked in the Detroit Zoo as selling peanuts and popcorn in one of the stands. In
Really?
the meantime, one of my friends who was down the street was a Dave Brubeck fan.
Oh, wow.
He played alto. He loved Paul Desmond.
Yeah.
He said, "I got these gigs, man, at the fraternity down in Belle Isle, which is a name. It's a resort near the downtown Detroit.
Hmm.
And the fraternity said having parties all the time. They need a band, so can you make this gig?" I said, "Well, I don't know any tunes. I know one or two, but I'm not really." So here's a record, and he gave me the disc of Dave Brubeck and the quartet with Ron Crotty on bass and guy before Joe Morello playing drums. And I listened to the record and I learned the tunes and we made some gigs. Those were my first money earning gigs in Detroit.
Mm.
When I graduated in '59, when I graduated in June of 1959, I went to Detroit in August, went to New York in August, and joined Chico Hamilton at Birdland August of 1959. That was my
That's
first
fantastic.
New York gig.
Wow. Wow. Now, during that time, I'm not sure if you were listening to a lot of players, but bass players during that time, like Mingus and Oscar Pettiford, did they have any influence on you?
Well, I probably didn't get influenced by bass players until really down the line.
Really?
I was working with Randy Weston after Chico Hampton's gig,
Randy
you
Weston.
know,
Yeah.
and we worked in New York for a place called the Five Spot, a real
Five
famous
Spot.
club back then,
Right.
for about 8 weeks.
Hmm.
And in 8 weeks, we worked opposite a lot of groups, the Jazz Tet, the first Jazz Tet. Kenny Dorham had a jam session quintet that worked. Ornette Coleman was there 2 weeks, so I heard a lot of bass players then. I was just impressed with things, not necessarily the bass player, the
Right.
libraries, and how the bands evolved over the course of 2 weeks. You
Mm.
know? And I'm still in school at 8 o'clock classes in the morning, so I'm not going to hang
Yeah.
out till sun up. So my hangout time, as far as really spending time with those musicians, whoever they were, just wasn't available to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I was more influenced by at the time because I was so close to them physically. J.J. Johnson,
Yeah. JJ's
uh,
great. Yeah.
who made the trombone do something was otherworldly at those times. He's playing
Hmm.
saxophone melodies and saxophone solos physically on the trombone.
Right.
And I worked with Cecil Payne with Randy Weston's band for about a year.
Boy.
And Cecil came along at the time when you had 5 incredible baritone players. His first Charloff, you had Harry Carney,
Yeah.
you had Leo Parker, you had Pepper Adams, you know. You had a lot of guys who were just playing really great. But Cecil found a way to have him playing saxophone, baritone, different than those guys.
Yeah.
And I never understood that because I'm watching him play with Randy Weston for almost a year, man. He playing hard tunes and some great songs and some good solos, and it sounded like Cecil Payne. I know
Wow.
what Pepper sounded like, man, and Harry Carney. I mean, we all heard those guys because they were the king of the horn at that time.
Yeah.
And here's this guy from Brooklyn by way of the West Indies who sounds like somebody else playing the same horn. It was amazing to me. So I figured, I can't understand how it's happening. I'm seeing it night in and night out.
Hmm.
Yeah, I worked opposite J.J. Johnson for a week, and I saw him never go past the bell but twice for, for 6 nights.
Wow.
I said, no, he's got the horn stuck, or he's got some other stuff happening. you know.
Wow.
So those guys were my
Mhm.
influences, and how to make the bass do what I thought was possible, because I saw them doing that on an instrument that was not a bass.
Right. Interesting. How'd you hook up with Thelonious Monk, man? I heard you play with Monk too.
Yeah,
Wow.
during the 61, 62, 61, Sam Jones was his bass player at the time.
Mm.
And Sam had a gig in New York at a place called Circle in the Square, which is right across from Village Gate. Thompson and
Okay.
Bleecker.
Okay.
They had a little small concert hall, maybe 500 seats, a really nice room. And Sam, who I'd met along the way as a working opposite those guys in the clubs, said that he was sick with the flu and could I cover this gig for him. I said, yeah, man, who was it with?
Wow.
He said, Thelonious Monk. Well, if Sam called me, I mean, I should be able to do the gig. So I didn't say, oh, man, yes. How do you say yes in French? I don't know that language, but you understand yes in English.
Right, right,
So I
right.
go to the gig. Mr. Monk is there. I introduce myself. I'm Sam Jones Sub. He's sick. And then Mr. Monk says, Mr. Monk says, I didn't call him Nonius. So Mr. Monk said, do you know my songs? I said, I know a lot of them. He said, well, we'll see which ones you don't know tonight. So we finished the gig, and the next week in Philadelphia. And he said, well, can you go? I said, Mr. Monk, I'm going to school every day. I'm in Manhattan for a degree. He said, well, if I bring you back and forth, can you do it? I said, yeah, I can do that.
Wow.
We'd leave New York about 6 o'clock. Philly's about a 2-hour drive. Get to Philly about 8 o'clock, 8:15.
Mm.
Play sets until 12 o'clock. And get in his vans and drive back to New York. Get back to New York about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'm up at 7:45 for an 8:30 class at Manhattan for a freshman theory class. I'm playing with only a Monk. This went
Wow.
on for 6 nights, man.
Six.
And it was really amazing to see this person who wrote Around Midnight,
Yeah.
and rhythming and Little Rudy Tooty and those tunes, and that we all grew up learning through someone else playing them.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah.
mean, how are you going to find a chance to play with Thelonious Monk and you're in Detroit, Michigan as a teenager, or in Rochester, New York?
Mm.
You're not going to see these guys until you see those guys.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
And to know that I'm playing, I'm going up and down the New Jersey Turnpike with this guy and getting off at the Camden stop, or Philadelphia stop, and going to Peps,
Mm.
for a week with the guy who had written all those famous songs.
Yeah.
It was,
Wow.
I think I haven't quite gotten over that yet. Yeah, I'm
Did
still
you,
kind
Ron?
of doing it.
Ron, when you played with him, did you find his music difficult? Was it really challenging for you to play his music?
Absolutely, it still is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the really good songs are always a challenge. And his whole library. This is the first time I was on a gig where he could play was a leader, could play only his songs if he wanted to,
Wow.
and they were all valid. The first person was probably Randy Weston,
Randy Weston.
who
Yeah.
wrote a lot of fantastic songs.
Hmm.
And then the next person probably was when I worked with Benny Golson, and I finally worked with him for a while. We could do the Benny Golson songbook all night and never stumble on the quality or the
Wow.
quantity of the songs. There's just so much inside the songs, you know.
Hmm.
And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to play with people who wrote those songs that are so part of the jazz library, you know. And it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
great to hear them do that
Amazing.
and hear me disagree with them.
Yeah, you did some stuff early in your career. I guess early 60s, you worked with Wes Montgomery as well.
Only
Great
made records
guitarist.
with him, never a club date.
Really?
No, no.
Interesting. Wow. What a fantastic musician he
Yes,
was.
sir, absolutely.
You know, well,
Incredible.
now, early 60s, something pivotal point, something happened in your career in 1963. How did you get to work with Miles Davis? I mean, all of us know about the famous quintet you were with for 5, 6 years, but how did you get to work with Miles?
I was working at this place called the Half Note, which is one of the more famous, one of the big and famous jazz clubs in New York at that time, down on Spring and Hudson.
Yeah.
I was working with the Art Farmer Quartet,
Art
and Art
Farmer.
was an incredible player, man. Again, he knew a lot of songs that never crossed my mind, and they were pretty far off the usual jazz track. And we were all playing bird tune with bird melody with the standard changes. Art knew a whole bunch of different songs that were songs unto themselves.
Hmm.
The quartet with Art Farmer, Jim Hall, who I later spent 30 years as a duo partner, and Walter Perkins, who was in from Chicago with a band called the MJT plus three with Bob Cranshaw and Harold Mabel.
Okay.
Really good band. I had signed up for 2 weeks with Art Farmer. And the word got out that Miles was looking for a new band because Wynton Kelly and the trio were going to join Wes Montgomery's quartet.
Yeah.
Uh, Let me go back a minute. I said I never made a gig with Wes. I did make a gig with him. Wes
Okay.
Montgomery at the Half Note did some live recordings, and one night Paul got sick, so I did the night for Wes. Then that's my only live gig.
Hmm.
Um, so when Miles came in the club during the second or third night of the gig, he called me over and said that he was putting together a new band because Wynton and Paul and Jimmy were going to leave and join the West Montgomery Quartet, and he's looking for putting together a new band, and well, I've been interested in joining this band. And I said, well, Mr. Davis, I didn't call him Miles, Mr. Davis, I'm working with Art Farmer for the next 2 weeks, starting like 2 nights ago. If you'll ask Mr. Farmer to relieve me of my obligation to him, I'll be happy to join your band. But you have to ask him, because I'm hired for him for 2 weeks. He said, okay. And when he got around to before the second set started, he asked to talk to Art. And Art agreed to let me leave the gig in the middle of the gig and join Miles going to California for 6 weeks. And before the night was over, Art called me aside and said he was really thrilled that I had such a high regard for him, Art Farmer, that for whoever Miles Davis was supposed to represent, it wasn't enough for me to dump you like that. And that was just, I said, man, isn't what people do? I mean, I don't know anybody who does that, man. I got to get into it. Look, first of all, I'm loving the gig. And I'm learning a lot of tunes, man. And I'm enjoying just playing with no piano for Jim Hall. Man, come on, really?
Great.
And Walter Perkins playing with the Ben Simmons and I was having a good time. Not that I was avoiding a good time, but man, I'm responsible to this guy. Yeah. This band's got one bass player. I'm it. And I'm not going to leave until something happens that makes that possible. In this case, he allowed it to happen. So we became really good friends after that, Art and I, you know, and I think Miles saw me a little bit differently at that point. Okay. That kind of colored our relationship up until he left the concert, you know, that he understood my values, and he knew, he assumed, and he was correct, that he had the same kind of respect that Art Farmer got.
Yeah.
Like, you won't go to work and find somebody else standing up there. No, man. I'm the last guy standing, Jack.
I hear you. You know, Ron, early in that band, I believe you guys had saxophonist George Coleman, and then, of course, Wayne Shorter. I think Miles had experimented with a couple different people. I think Hank Mobley even played like a little bit with him. He was experimenting with horn players. But once he got Wayne Shorter, what was your perception of Wayne? Because, you know, we all know he's a brilliant writer, one of the best composers of the 20th century. But what was your perception of Wayne and the stuff that he was writing?
Well, you know, I knew Wayne through the Art Blakey Ensemble. And that band was what kind of band? It was kind of straight ahead, wonderful players, you know, with a lot of real serious swing. Yeah. The band wasn't focused on Wayne's writing, despite it was Wayne's writing necessarily. Yeah. You know? I mean, Curtis did a couple of arrangements. You know, Freddie brought a couple of tunes in. Cedar brought a couple of tunes in. They were still playing some of the Bobby Timmons library. So the band was not focused on Wayne as a composer in and of itself. You know. I was just impressed with his playing because I had known his playing through the band, you know. Right. And I think I didn't understand the style and the library that he was writing for us to try to understand what he meant by whatever he wrote, you know, until he got this band. Yeah. And I think he was able to write maybe a little less constrained because the band was a little less constrained. Yeah. The environment changed, and the environment was as curious about playing as he was curious about writing. So I'm sure as the band developed, Wayne's writing evolved. And if you listen to his records after that period of time as a band leader, he was writing different tunes and he was playing differently as well. I mean, he was really playing good with Art. He was playing differently good with that band. Yeah. His records were they were the bigger, not big ensembles, you know, sextets, you know, bigger, more explosive quintets than up to that point. But you know, he was Wayne Shorter, and here's a chance for him to, a tight phrase, really stretch out. And that implies that he was hamstrung or he was kind of like this with the other band. No, I'm not saying that. Right. But this band's presence on his music and his sound allowed him to do like this. And he's wonderful to be around. You know, when we traveled, one of my jobs, Preston, was to kind of monitor Wayne because he would just keep buying books, film books, library books, Black history books all the time. You know, and they're kind of too much for the road to carry. So my job was to limit Wayne's buying reading material on the road. You know,
Gotcha.
but just to have a chance to play his music and watch it develop and watch it evolve and watch him write according to that environment, all that stuff was part of the process for us.
Yeah, yeah. I heard that when you guys would do recording sessions, Miles would call Wayne and says, "Bring the book," with all
Yeah.
the tunes. But all that stuff you guys did, man, from ESP to Miles Smiles, which is a favorite of mine, Miles in the Sky. Now, at the end of that, things started moving in a different direction with the electric, Tony Williams Lifetime, Miles Bitches Brew, in a Silent Way. Now, I think Miles wanted you to play electric bass, but you didn't want to do that.
No, there's a couple of reasons. One, he was starting to travel more and more with the rock band,
I got you.
and I had two sons, and I wanted to kind of be a part of their process.
Mm.
You know, I wanted to be more a part of their process. You know. Secondly, the studio industry in New York was really opening up to African American players. George Vivier, bass player, Milt Hinton, a bass player. And
Yeah.
they were really making the scene necessary. Richard Davis.
Yeah.
They were really making the music scene in New York that was already exploding because now the recording of jingles was really taking off.
Uh-huh.
Those three guys made the producers hire African Americans because they really set the standard for bass playing that African American players were kind of responsible for,
Yeah.
So at this time, there were 4 or 5 jazz labels in New York that were doing a lot of recording. I mean, they were coming from Japan and from Europe, CBS, Sony, Milestone, Riverside, Fantasy.
Yeah.
They're all making records.
Yeah.
And I was one of the people who was part of that recording process. It just seemed to me that I could stay in New York and work gigs at night, and had some private students. And I could still play what I thought was necessary to play to get better at playing the bass and make some money as well. So I decided that was what I wanted to do. So I explained it to him. So, Miles, all these reasons is why I'm not going to go out. It has nothing to do with not liking electric bass. It has nothing to do with the electric music. I just
Gotcha.
got another sound. And I'm going to try to make that sound work for me.
Mm.
As it turned out, I made several records playing electric bass. And I
Yeah,
made several more playing cello. So I wasn't abandoning anything else just for the sake of saying, I've abandoned that. No, I just found a scene that I could do that. And still go home and I said, gee, I played the best I could, but tonight, can I play better than this tomorrow night?
Yeah, yeah. In the 70s, you played with a lot of different people. I like the stuff you did with VSOP, those McCoy Tyner records. I think Trident with McCoy is one of my favorites.
Really?
I love. Yeah, yeah. And even when I saw you years ago in Shelbyville, Delaware, you were signing some of my albums, and I pulled out McCoy's album Extensions, and you were like, "Man, I haven't heard this album in a long time."
I heard it last week for the second time in about 6 weeks.
Wow, wow. Yeah, and just a lot of good music, a lot of stuff you were doing during that time period. One of my favorites, you did this, I believe in Japan. There was a trio with you, Tony Williams, and McCoy. I think it was done in 1978 on the Milestone label. It was fantastic. It's a live recording, one of my favorites, under McCoy's name.
Yeah.
But, you guys would continue to do things and even regroup. I think you guys, the tribute to Miles was fantastic when, of course, brought in Wallace Rooney and the band got back together, just playing that music. Yeah. Now, what was it like for you to go back and play that music, say, 15, 20 years later, with that group? Was it sort of like old cliche or like, wow, I'm hooking back up with these guys again, doing this music that we really, set a standard in the 60s. What was it like playing that music again for you?
That's a hard question to answer from that point of view. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how people, because conceive new and old music,
Right.
you know? And then who decides when this music's had enough? Or who decides when these guys can't do any more with that music?
Right.
And are these people who decide that, are they professional players? Are they collecting royalties from the publishing house? Are they trying to write that stop me? What's that view based on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's still playing that old music. Well, what? What is that old music? Did you hear it last night? Didn't sound like last week to me, man. You know?
Right.
So I was never concerned with that view of, am I going back to the day?
Right.
I was always impressed with that. I want to play with these guys again so that I can show them how much better I got in 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing what they've been doing with their bands. It's great. This is what I've been doing, man. I don't see them until I get to this gig. I haven't seen Freddie in all this time. Herbie's got his bands going. Tony's got the Lifetime stuff. You know, Wayne's doing what he's doing. But everybody's separated. Great. And they're doing their own musical projects.
Right.
I seldom see them and seldom hear their music because I'm working my own scene. So when I finally get in the room with these guys, I'm not worried about playing all the things you are. I'm trying to show these guys how much better I can play all the things you are right now.
Exactly.
And I tell those guys, you're in for a theory lesson. Grab a seat.
You know, Ron, something that was really beautiful, an event that took place in 1985, one night at Blue Note, how all of you guys just came back together, did that concert. I think Alfred Lyne was there, you, Freddie, Herbie,
Yeah.
everyone was there, man. That was beautiful. What was that like for you to reunite with all of those guys that night?
I think all of us were so joyed, so overwhelmed by seeing these people we had grown up listening to and making music with, that we
Right.
all sounded terrible that night. I think the emotional feeling of just seeing Jimmy Smith and
Yeah.
having a chance to play with him and watch Freddie do what I haven't heard him do in 10 years. And just the physical presence of all my friends
Yeah.
who I'm growing up and loved for all this time, who I haven't seen because I've been in my own world more or less. Just to see them alive and well, man, and still playing and still fooling around. I said, man, the emotion for all of us. No one wanted to say it out loud, man, because we kind of a proud bunch of people, you know.
Mhm.
I think the emotion of this flower being made visible again with the bright lights, that was more important to us, I think, than the music that night.
Mm, that's beautiful. You know, one of the things that really
You cut off again. Can't hear you.
uh,
There you go.
there we go. Yeah, I don't know what happened, but yeah, in the '90s, you hooked up and played
Don't
with.
touch the knobs.
Oh, in the early '90s, you played with a tribe called Quest, which was amazing. How did that whole thing come about, Ron?
Well, you know, I was on the fringe area of that music, listening, going back and forth to work, but never spent any time uh, getting more involved than whatever was on the playing at that time between the gas station and my house or the garage, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I got this call one day coming in from school. I was teaching at City College at the time, and I get my call walking in from school, and there's a person that says, "This is Mr. Curtis and Q-Tip," and I said, "Okay." And he said, "I'm with a band called Tribe Called Quest," and I said, "Okay." And he said, "We're putting together a record, and I want to know if you were available to make this record with us." I said,
Mm,
"Well, I just walked in from school, got my book bag. Let me get back to you. Give me a number, I can call you back, and I will call you back within the next day or so." Well, this is up time for me to call one of my sons who was into this music. And I think I called Miles finally. And I said, "Miles, I got a call from this guy called Q-Tip. I may have got his name wrong just so I can jerk him around, but Q or R-Tip, some kind of alphabet name. And he wants me to make a record with him, but I don't know any more of his music." He said, "Dad?" I said, "Yes." So he's one of the guys who's making music out of the hip hop stuff. If he asked you to record with him, you ought to say, yeah. Okay. So that's enough for me. So I got back to him the next day and I said, my son has recommended that I make this record with you. Having said that, I know some of the records that I hear and the language skills that those guys prevail on record is really not my skill set, you know. And because my son thinks so highly of your group's musical presence and how your sense of harmony and shape of melody has impressed him enough for me to think I can help you do this. If the lyrics start going sideways, man, I'm going to leave.
Okay.
I just don't do that, you know. I'm not into the drugs and no, I'm going to work, and I'm glad to try to help you as best I can.
Right.
I have my limits, you know, and my car be parked. I'm parked on the street next door to the studio, and my motor be running, and my bass case will be nearby. And it starts going sideways, man. I'm packing up my stuff and I'm going home. Believe me, I mean that. So Mr. Carter, don't worry about it. We had this covered. I said, okay. So we set up a time and date and agree on some serious stuff. And I got to the date and I started being in the studio. I was in the control room with the engineer and the board and stuff. And he said, this is the poem. So let me read it so I can see what it looks like and just get a sense of what you think the rhythm is. And then I play it like I think the rhythm is. So we got the sounds right and we found kind of a tone center for his voice that would fit the range that I was fooling around with. And we did maybe 2 or 3 takes of the material, and I was ready to go home because it was the best I could do, and they were very happy with it. And that's what the record turned out to be.
Fantastic. That was great, man. Yeah, I was like surprised when I saw you do that. You know, Ron, as I said, you've worked with so many people over the years, and one of the things that really impressed me, and I know you know this, you're the most recorded bassist in history. I just did some research. You've been on over 2,200 recordings. How is that even possible?
Sleep when I can and play when I'm not sleeping.
I hear you, man. I hear you. You know, so any projects that you're working on or writing? I mean, of course, we're all quarantined because of the COVID-19, but are you writing or do you have any ideas of things that you may want to do? And like I said, I caught your group with Russell Malone, which is fantastic. The last couple of times that you've come. As a matter of fact, you were actually at Keystone Corner when Todd launched it last year when you were there for those 4 nights and I was there for that. That was fantastic that you came back again, but and hopefully I'll see you again soon. But are you writing or do you have any ideas of things that you may want to put together once this thing is over?
Well, before the fan got hit by something, I was planning to do it one night at Manhattan School of Music. They're having an icon series. And it'd been worked out that I'd do the whole night, the concert. The opening act would be 3 songs with a big band, and then 2 songs with a trio, Russell and Donald.
Yeah.
And then the fourth 2 songs with the quartet with James Green and Irene Malthus and Peyton Crosley. And then 2 songs with the octet with 4 cellos and the jazz quartet, me, Dave, Donald Vega, Peyton, and another bass player, and then with a duo. That was 5 nights, one lifetime, and 5 nights. But of course, they had to shut the door because this thing, what happened. Yeah. So I'm kind of enjoying. I'm kind of enjoying not being worn out at doing that.
I gotcha.
But I'm waiting for it to open up. So I've had enough energy stored up over the past 2 months so far. Yeah. I'm ready to bust out all over again.
I hear you, man. I hear you. You know, something that I would love to see, I don't think anyone's ever done one, is a documentary on you. I would love to see something like that.
Well, there's stuff in the works, and it only hasn't happened because right now we can't do anything. And secondly, it's kind of hard for me to feel like the letter I. You know, and I'm not really good at that, you know.
I got you.
And they have they've done some nice work, my friends who are doing this. And it's just a matter of, right now, just a matter of the physical time being available when we get able to communicate and not be socially limited to our contact and our travel. We'd like to get it done within a year, within this year.
I got you.
From what the trailer I saw, they have some nice things, and I'm the first guy saying, man, the compliments are kind of embarrassing. Not that I haven't earned them, but to hear them from those guys who's saying them is just kind of overwhelming to me right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, my friend, I want to thank you so much for this interview. You're a treasure. We love you. You're a class act. And hang on for a second. Don't hang up, but I'm going to close the show out. Well, you've heard it from the great Ron Carter. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.